Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Injury Law Pod. I am your host, Eric Bartlett, 28-year personal injury lawyer, and this is the podcast where we deal almost exclusively with personal injury related issues. Sometimes we get off track, but generally speaking, we're here to inform our listeners about different areas of personal injury law, how they may affect you, and what you need to know in the event that you're faced with some type of a personal injury and you may have a claim to make and you just don't know how to go about doing that. Up on today's episode, we're going to talk about two different things, really not related, but both can have effects on people because there's something that everybody can encounter almost on a daily basis. So, first off, we're going to talk about black ice. As winter approaches, this is a great time to just look at the dangerousness that exists out there on roadways, on sidewalks, parking lots, those places. Just a good reminder of what we need to be thinking about when we've had snow or rain or ice and it's winter and it's freezing and we see a lot of those calls. So we're going to go over the dangers of black ice. And then we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about dangerous vehicle parts, things that can be going on in a car that can lead to an accident or maybe don't perform in an accident the way they're supposed to, that leads to an injury. And we're also going to look at what if you're in an accident with somebody that claims something went wrong with their vehicle and that caused the accident. You're the one that's hurt. You're not at fault. But now, what do you do? Because if you've got somebody saying it wasn't because of their driving, but it was something wrong with their car, how do you go about handling a claim like that? So, as always, we hope you find this information useful. And if you're listening to this podcast, I always ask, if you enjoy it, find it informative, please leave a 5-star rating wherever you found it, because that helps us spread the word through our podcast. All right. So let's dive into black ice. And what is that? It's really not black ice. It's clear ice. And it's probably the most dangerous condition that I see as a personal injury lawyer. It causes the most injuries during the winter time. We just had our first snow here in Missouri, and in the Kansas City area, I think we got about probably 3 inches of snow. And when that was going on, of course, everybody realized it's snowing. And if they had to get out, in theory, they were probably more careful, whether they were driving or once they got to their destination, they were walking, because the snow's everywhere. It's happening right then and there. It's very obvious. Even though, and possibly me included, when we get out there for the first time in a snowstorm and you're driving, you have to reset the brain to driving in those conditions. I was out during the snow and I saw plenty of people that were struggling. They were making turns too quickly. I literally almost saw an accident occur when somebody was trying to make a turn and they were going too fast, and they quickly realized that they were headed for the car that was stopped at the stop sign. But luckily they were able to pull it out and not hit the car. But what happens is the snow gets cleared on the roadways, in a parking lot, on the sidewalks, and then the residual moisture or the melting that occurs from where the snow was piled up, that freezes overnight. So you have the sun come out. Yesterday was the perfect example because as I cleared my driveway, the snow was melting as I was clearing the driveway. And then what happened was the temperatures dropped significantly overnight down to, I think, about 18 degrees. Of course, all that melted snow ended up turning into ice overnight. So you come out in the morning, and if you're not expecting it, there's this layer of thin, clear ice that is potentially over everything that was cleared, or it can be in spots. And this is what we see in my professional world. I see this a lot as the cause of many faults. And people go out and businesses, they try to clear these areas and then they don't follow up. So you got to recognize if you're clearing snow, you have to continue to follow up to look for these areas that froze or after the melt froze and now are creating these hidden dangers. And so when you're on the roadways, it doesn't even have to, this is the crazy part, it doesn't even have to have rained or snowed on the roadways to create black ice. There can be conditions where basically the moisture in the air kind of meets with the surface of the roadway and it freezes and it creates these areas of black ice on the roadways. And bridges are notorious for being super slick with black ice because you have the airflow that goes over the bridge, you have the airflow that goes under the bridge, and it can really cause havoc out on the roadways. You'll see in a lot of places, I know when I go down to Arkansas especially, they have signs in front of all their bridges saying, watch out for ice, bridges freeze before the regular roadway, because they obviously have a big problem in the more southern states with that moisture hitting the roadway and freezing. And so it can come out of nowhere essentially this time of the year. But then on the other hand, it can also be the product of clearing the roadways. The residual moisture is on there. And again, it heats up during the day with the sun, everything's melted. And then as soon as the sun goes down and the temperatures drop, it's ice. And you can be driving along. I've personally experienced it. Driving along, you think the road is fine, and all of a sudden, boom, you've got a loss of traction, and it's a really scary feeling when your car goes from traction to no traction. And especially if you're on a highway and you're traveling at a higher rate of speed than say you would be on a side road. So you've just got to be mindful about that, especially right after a snow event, that even though the roads were cleared and probably chemicals were put down to help with freezing, it can still, there's only so much that can do. And again, when you come across bridges and things like that, that's a real high area that can cause slick spots. And essentially what the experts tell us to do, if you do hit a slick spot like that, don't panic. Try to let off the gas. Don't brake. Whatever you do, if you brake when you do not have good traction, you have no ability to control your car. You lose all your steering capabilities. And now you're out of control for sure. And you're probably going to end up in a spin or careening off to one side or the other. But your best bet is let off the gas, Try to just steer through it and stay straight, get past the slick spot, and then make it out to the other side. And then when it comes to being a pedestrian, whether you're out shopping, maybe you're taking a walk, something like that, this time of the year, you've got to be mindful of those slick spots, black ice. Again, it's not black, it's clear, and it can be on any surface. And if you're not paying attention to those conditions, and if somebody hasn't retreated what they did in the first place, it's going to lead to you potentially falling and getting hurt. And we see it a lot. We get a lot of calls this time of year for accidents, falls that are the result of ice. And you just really have to be careful. And again, if you're a business, you've got to be really mindful because people are coming to your store, your restaurant, and they're going to be making their way in your parking lot, your sidewalks, things like that. And sometimes, no matter how careful somebody is walking, they hit that black ice. It's literally like you have no control. You're down in a second. And so it's just really important for people to follow up on the treating that they did. Great job. You cleared the snow, but now you got to follow up in the days after because of the thawing and refreezing. It happens. There's no way of getting around that. Our area is not one that just stays frozen. If you go to Colorado, if you've ever been out skiing or something like that, it's frozen all the time. There's just a layer of kind of packed snow. It's easy to maintain your footing and you really don't run into issues. But around here, there's a lot of melting and a lot of refreezing. And so it requires extra vigilance on everybody's part in attempting to stay safe. So remember, black ice, dangerous condition. Take care of it if you're the property owner. And if you're walking, just be really careful this time of the year. Okay, switching gears completely. There's absolutely no relation here to these two things. But I wanted to talk with you all today about dangerous vehicle parts. We call them defective products, right? Something is wrong with a car, a truck, something of that nature, and it leads to an accident. Or there's an accident that occurs and the vehicle does not perform the way it should to protect the occupants of the vehicle. And we see this in a kind of a multitude of different ways in my world, because we have people that are in an accident and an airbag doesn't deploy or something like that, and it leads to an injury. Or we see a situation where there's an accident and the person that seemingly is at fault for the accident is claiming that something went wrong with their vehicle and that caused the accident. So they're saying they were doing everything fine. They applied their brakes, the brakes didn't work, that kind of thing. So some common examples of faulty equipment in vehicles, faulty parts, would be brakes, as I just mentioned, defective airbags, again, I just mentioned. There can be steering system issues. There can be tire problems, tire blowouts, and there can be electrical malfunction. Now, there's two potential sources of problems like this. It can be a manufacturing defect. So for example, with airbags are notorious for having problems, or it can be due to poor maintenance. which contributes to the failure. And this is really important because, again, especially if you're on the side of being in an accident with another driver and that other driver is claiming there's a problem with the vehicle, we need to know, was this something that started when the vehicle was designed and manufactured? Or is this something that, because of that at-fault driver's maintenance on their vehicle, that's what caused the problem? And obviously, a huge difference, because if you've got a manufacturing defect in place with a vehicle, you may have a claim against the manufacturer of the vehicle. So this is if you're not even the owner of the vehicle, you've been hit by another driver, they're saying something was wrong with their vehicle, and you're now stuck with, if you can't prove they're at fault, if they have a legitimate basis for their claim that something was wrong with their vehicle, and let's say it's not due to their failure to properly maintain their vehicle, that it's a true manufacturer defect, in order to get a recovery, you're going to now have to go after the manufacturer of the vehicle. Now, realistically, when is this even going to be something that is viable to do? Like, when is this going to even economically make sense? Because as you might imagine, if you try to make a claim against a vehicle manufacturer, maybe it's Ford, maybe it's GM, maybe it's Chevy, maybe it's Volkswagen, whoever it might be, you are going to have a major uphill battle on your hands. But for a very serious injury, somebody that's paralyzed in an accident, or maybe somebody's killed, at that point, it very well may be worth the fight of trying to find out, was something defective about this vehicle? Now, again, this could also be on the same side. Let's say you're in your own vehicle and for whatever reason, you have an accident. Nobody else is involved. And some safety mechanism did not work as it was supposed to. And you might have only one recourse, which is against a manufacturer, if something that they had put in the vehicle to potentially prevent the kind of harm that you experienced in this accident, then again, you very well may have a claim against the manufacturer. But these are big time battles, very expensive to pursue. So just to break it down a little bit, if you're going to make a claim against a manufacturer for a faulty vehicle, you're basically going to have to get that vehicle. You're going to have to buy that vehicle. So if it's a total loss, or if not, let's say somebody else owns it. They caused the accident, but now they're claiming there was a manufacturer defect. You're going to have to make sure that vehicle is preserved. So whether you take the necessary steps to prevent them from doing anything with the vehicle until such time as you can have it fully inspected and tested, or whether you have to buy that vehicle so that you preserve it. Because think about it, it's somebody else's vehicle. Let's say it's totaled in the accident. They want to get paid for their car, and they don't want to just sit there waiting around while you hold up that process so that you can potentially make your claim against the manufacturer. You're probably going to have to buy their car. You're going to have to work through that. So typically, how does that happen? Generally, you're getting a lawyer involved, because a lawyer could obviously know the ways to go about preserving the vehicle so that a product safety engineer, and specifically a vehicle safety engineer, can get access to the vehicle to do the appropriate testing. And the other important part of it is to preserve that vehicle so that the manufacturer's experts can also have the opportunity to inspect and test the vehicle. Because without the vehicle, without the component that is being alleged was defective, there's no case. You've got to have, that's evidence. You've got to have all of that, and you have to have it preserved. And it may be something that stays preserved over the course of 2, 3, 4 years, depending on how long a lawsuit would carry on in relationship to whatever the injury claim is. I have seen failures in seatbelts, tires, brakes. I've seen where there's been allegations of the structure of the vehicle not holding up. Once upon a time, we had a young man who was a backseat passenger of a vehicle, and the vehicle rolled, and the top of the roof of the vehicle collapsed down, leading to paralysis. And so there's just all kinds of particular components that very well may be involved in a what we call a crashworthiness claim. And all that means is, was the vehicle up to the appropriate standards to protect its occupants in the event of a crash? And again, as I've already addressed, there's a lot of potential components that could be involved. And on the other side of it, again, if you're in an accident with a driver and that driver's claiming some defect, you're going to need to figure out, was it due to an inherent manufacturer defect, or was it due to something that driver didn't do with regards to appropriate maintenance of their vehicle? A perfect example is tires or brakes. When's the last time they had their brakes replaced? What about the tires? Were the tires the appropriate tread depth to be safe on the roadways? So just because an at-fault driver says, whoa, it's not my fault, something went wrong with the car, it could still be their fault. And so all of that has to be delved into to figure out what the true cause of the accident was. You're looking at potentially manufacturer liability, which is, again, usually a long shot. You're looking at potentially that driver's responsibility for the failure to maintain their vehicle. And a third possibility is, what if the week before this accident, they had their vehicle in and they had the brakes replaced by a mechanic? And what if the mechanic didn't do it correctly? There's something wrong with the job that was done. You have a potential claim against a repair shop or mechanic, whatever that looks like. So there's multiple layers of possibilities with who's responsible. And again, this could even be on your own vehicle. What if you went in and you had new tires put on or brakes replaced or something like that, and something goes wrong, and now there's an accident shortly thereafter, and it's determined the part that was worked on was not done correctly, then you've got a potential claim against that automotive repair shop. One of the big claims that was in the news here in the last few years was the faulty Takata airbags. You probably heard about this when airbags that were in all kinds of different vehicles, all different makes and models, were, when they deployed, They were shooting metal shards out, a clear defect. This was a big problem. There were 16 people known to be killed in these types of accidents in the United States, 30 worldwide. Hundreds of people were injured since 2009. And there have been millions of vehicle recalls over these Takata airbags. And so there have been claims made because of these faulty airbags for people that were seriously injured and or killed. And that's a prime example of what I'm talking about here today. So once an accident has happened, and if there's any belief that there's a faulty problem with a vehicle or vehicles that are involved in the accident, then some steps need to be taken pretty quickly. Obviously, it's always ideal if photos are taken at the scene, video, things like that of the vehicles. I say that for any accident. If it's possible, photographs at the scene are huge. They could become very relevant if a lawsuit has to be filed on an accident. Sometimes the police take photos at the accident scene, but not always. It depends on the severity of the injuries involved. And the other big thing too is witnesses. Again, anytime you can identify witnesses to an accident, that's always very helpful in making any type of a claim. Again, preserving that vehicle is crucial. If anybody believes there was a equipment failure on the vehicle, and you want to make sure that, again, let's say you've got a person that's caused an accident and they're claiming something's wrong with their vehicle. You want to make sure you put them on notice to preserve any maintenance records they have on the vehicle, because these are going to potentially be really important items in any subsequent lawsuit in the claim. Now, what should we be doing as drivers so that we don't potentially end up with a claim like this? We're either claiming the manufacturer did something wrong in the manufacturer design of the vehicle, or again, if somebody's claiming some faulty part of a vehicle. Obviously, routine maintenance and inspection of your vehicle is critical. You cannot just drive a vehicle and hope for the best. You've got to have it checked out at least once a year. If you get your oil changed somewhere, or if you bring it in for something, just have them look over your vehicle. Are your tires in good shape? Are the brakes sufficient? Are the seat belts good, in good condition? Is all that stuff working like it's supposed to? So you got to make sure you're staying up on top of that. And the other big thing is, if you get a recall notice in the mail about your vehicle, you need to tend to that. I know it sucks because now you've got to make the appointment, you got to take it in, it's an ordeal, and you're thinking, okay, they think there might be something wrong with the car, but it's running fine. It's not causing any issues, but you just can't ignore those recall notices. And you can go to the National Highway and Transportation Safety Administration's website, and you can actually plug in your VIN number or your license plate number, and you can find out if your car currently has any safety recalls on it. And I recommend you do it because it's really important, based on everything I've just talked about, to know whether your car has any pending safety recalls out there. We'll put the link in the notes to this podcast as well, but I can't emphasize that enough. If you've got a safety recall, take the time, get in there, get it fixed. And again, if for any reason you've got unusual noises happening with your car, you've noticed the steering seems a little looser than it used to be, if you've got any warning lights on the dash, get to a mechanic, make sure you're not driving around in this weapon, right? Vehicles are heavy, they go fast, and you want to make sure they're as safe as they could possibly be so that they don't hurt you or they don't hurt somebody else. And so just keep in mind faulty equipment, it can cause serious accidents. We see them not frequently, but every year we see two or three. We get calls from people, and this is an issue and it needs to be explored, especially depending on the severity of the injury. And again, I just encourage you prioritize vehicle safety. And I know with all the costs that are out there in the world, sometimes we're just hoping to get by as long as it's running, but you really need to make sure you're not driving around in a dangerous vehicle. And I hope you found this information useful. I hope you found the information about the black ice useful. Just want everybody to be safe and be careful out there. And until the next episode, be well.